I'm just going to wait until we've got somebody online here. All right. Hey, thanks for joining me. I just got back from Ukraine night before last, and I've been trying to find my desk, getting things unpacked for the last day or so. I wanted to talk a little bit about what I'm seeing all over the place regarding the war in Ukraine. There's a lot of misconceptions. I just returned from a trip to Ukraine. This is my, I don't know, eighth trip or something. I've now spent probably more than 6 months there since the war started. And this time I got to go out to the Donetsk province and visit the front lines and kind of talk to some of the guys that are out there fighting, talk to some of the chaplains, talk to some of the people who are, doing the job, and also got to talk to the president's advisor, the mayor of Kyiv. So I got a nice, well-rounded sense for what's going on in the war. And the first thing I want to do is I want to address the meme that I'm seeing all over social media that people are partying and going to the beach in Kyiv, and while there's a war on, and so the insinuation is that either there's not actually a war on, or there is a war on, and the money that the United States is spending is somehow funding people partying in Kyiv. Neither of those is true. If yeah, I just kind of say, so what? Yes, there are people partying. There are people going to the beach. There are people going to nightclubs in Kyiv. One of the things that I had heard quite a bit in the last several months is that Ukraine was running out of men. That all of their men had been drafted. They'd all been mobilized, and they're getting killed at such a high rate that they, were about to run out of troops. Well, there are military-age males walking all over the place, all over that country, that are not in the military. And they're not at full mobilization. They have not even come close to full mobilization. Full mobilization in Ukraine would look like 5 million or more under arms. Right now they have about 750,000 under arms, and they've only got about 250,000 on the front lines. The rest of those are in, if we don't fight the fight, we'll be fighting in our countries. That's a good point, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But let's talk about this meme going around that people are partying in Kyiv. First of all, if it's wrong for people to go out to eat, to go out to nightclubs, to go to the beach on a sunny day in Kyiv when the country is at war, then it was just as wrong for people to be doing those things in the United States between like 2001 and 2021. There's nothing wrong with those people who are not directly involved in fighting the conflict going out and enjoying themselves. As a matter of fact, I talked to some of the guys on the front lines who said they love to see that. They love to see people enjoying themselves back in Kyiv, because that lets them know that A, they are fighting for those people to be able to do that, and B, it's a big middle finger to Vladimir Putin saying, we are not going to stop what we're doing. We're not going to stop our lives for you. And it is possible to do two things at once, for Ukraine to be fully involved in this conflict and very serious about winning it. And it's also possible for them, the people who are not fighting, to actually enjoy themselves and go out to eat once in a while, that sort of thing. So that's something that I think is kind of ridiculous. It's the propagandists are making big hay out of the fact that people are enjoying themselves in Kyiv, when in reality Kyiv is not anywhere near 600 miles from the conflict. And not only that, but they are still under almost daily rocket and missile attacks. There were several while we were there. And we even saw one missile that was shot down right over our heads, pretty much, up in the sky one day. And so it's still not perfectly safe in Kyiv, although I would have to say it is safer in Kyiv right now than it is in Philadelphia or Cleveland or Miami or Baltimore or Dallas or Portland or San Francisco or Los Angeles or pretty much any big city in America. I would rather have my family in Kyiv right now, living there, as far as safety is concerned, than I would having them live in any large American city, because the security just is not there. They don't have the problems with smash and grab robberies, with people blocking traffic, doing protests, with gun violence, with drug use, just all those things. They don't have those problems in Kyiv right now, partially because they're still under they are at war, and so the strip clubs are not open and things like that. But they're also a very homogenous society, and they take care of that problem. If somebody's being a jackass in Kyiv, the citizens themselves are going to beat that guy down and drag him off. And the police are going to be just fine with that. Vigilante justice is maybe not the greatest thing, but it is a thing in Ukraine. And if somebody is caught taking bribes or being dishonest, I've seen where a policeman was asking for bribes, and the people went out and took, like, a whole bunch of guys showed up at the checkpoint where that guy was, took him down, beat that guy's butt right there on the side of the road, and then handed him over to the police. At one point, while we were in the frontline area in Kramatorsk, I was with Dave Eubank and the Free Burma Rangers, and at one point they were saying how when they get shelled, this is again frontline area, and they get rocketed and shelled on a very regular basis there. And normally it happens at night. And the police were saying, we don't have generators to run lights, so it's much harder to go look for survivors and try to save people that are in buildings that get collapsed by these rockets. And Dave Eubank said, well, let me buy some generators for you. Here's $3,000 cash for you to go get some generators. And those cops just about did a backflip. They were like, no, we will not touch that money. We have to avoid even the appearance of corruption here. If you want to donate something for us, you go buy it and then bring it to the police station and drop it off, and the police will use it. But we are not taking cash from anybody. My car got towed one day while we were in Kyiv, which was a little ridiculous, but neither here nor there. It's just one of those things that happens. I thought, it's hard to find parking. I thought I found a decent parking space. Another car had been there and it had just left. And we got out and looked, and it looked like it was fine. Apparently it was a couple inches over the line, and we came back and the car was gone. So we went to the impound lot. We got there about 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, and there were two policemen standing there guarding the impound lot. And we were like, we need to get our car back. And I said, well, you have to call the main office, and they're closed already, so you're going to have to come back on Monday. This was Friday. And we said, we can't come back on Monday because we have to go to the Donbass region tomorrow, and we need that car to do it. And they said, man, I'm really sorry about that. And I'm like, look, isn't there anything we can do? Is there something we can do? Like, can we help, can we donate to the policeman's benevolence fund, something? And they just kind of looked at me and they said, no, you have to go to the office. And so, if it was as corrupt a country as everybody says it is, it should have been pretty easy to slip those guys a $20 bill or something and get my car out of hock. But they were not having it. They were not going for that. And in the end, we did have to go through official channels, and just by the grace of God and through a lot of prayer, there was still somebody at the office when we called down there, and they were able to allow us to pay and get our car out so we could leave the next day. Thank God for that. Suffice it to say that if Ukraine was as corrupt a country as everybody says it is, those kinds of things would be easier. I'm not saying there isn't any corruption. They have rooted out quite a bit of corruption in the year and a half that we've been there. While we were there, President Zelensky fired all of the regional heads of the Army recruiting office because it turns out they were taking money so that some guys could buy their way out of being of serving in the military. And so he fired them all. And so, look, I'm not saying there is no corruption, but I'm saying it's not as pervasive as everybody says it is. The fact that everybody says that it's one of the most corrupt countries on the planet does not take into account the fact that these people have been working very hard to root out the corruption in their country. Everybody says they want less corruption. And so they actually voted Vladimir Zelensky into the presidency in order to root out corruption. That's what they did. And he has done a lot of things to root out corruption. I could name off a half a dozen just off the top of my head. And just like most people think that Colombia is a super dangerous place because of the drug cartels down there, Colombia was a super dangerous place 20 years ago. But it's not so much now. It's actually statistically less dangerous than Panama is, where I'm sitting. And they have made great strides against the drug cartels in that way. But people's perception of corruption and danger lags the reality in many cases. And I think that's the case in Ukraine. Suffice it to say, if you want to talk corruption, there's plenty to talk about here in America. We don't need to talk about corruption in Ukraine. We can, and even talking about, the Burisma scandal and the scandal of the Biden administration wanting to have a prosecutor fired in order to, I don't know, get his son off the hook, Hunter Biden. Well, okay, but to me, that speaks to American corruption using Ukraine as a venue rather than Ukrainian corruption. Don't you agree? So now let's just go on and talk about the issue of what this is costing. Because look, I'm not a big fan of giving U.S. tax dollars to anybody because I'm not a big fan of the government having any tax dollars. I think that taxation is theft. They take far more than they should. The government is so bloated. Did you know there are 23 million government employees in the United States? I mean, just think about that for a second. Do we really need 23 million? Almost, 8% of our entire populace works for the government? Are you kidding me? The amount of money that the government wastes, I was just looking that up, before I got on here. And it says that over the last 2 decades, the government has lost almost $2.4 trillion in tax money. Lost. They don't have any idea where it went. They can't account for it at all. $2.4 trillion. The U.S. government wastes about, they're saying here in this article, $247 billion last year. So if the U.S. government wasted $247 billion last year, and that doesn't count the $1.7 trillion that they give out in welfare benefits, that doesn't count the hundreds of millions of dollars, or actually billions of dollars that they give away to foreign countries like Israel and even Russia, and Azerbaijan and countries that have no business getting any money from the United States, Mexico. The fact that the U.S. government is so ridiculously wasteful. I read years ago that of every dollar that comes in tax dollars, the United States wastes about 40 cents of that. Their overhead is 40 cents. So before any money gets given out in any kind of program in the United States, 40% of it goes away. Now, if you ran a charity that had a 40% overhead, you would be run out on a rail. You would be closed down. That you'd probably be investigated for fraud. Most charities run something like below 7% in overhead. A charity that I'm very familiar with, Operation Blessing, that I've worked with a lot over the years, their overhead is 0.7%. So the government's overhead on the tax revenues that it brings in is something like 40%. That is absolutely profane. So I am not in favor of giving tax money to pretty much anybody. However, if I'm not going to change that, the government is going to continue to waste money, is going to continue to give money out to lots of places, and that's just the way it is. Suffice it to say that we really don't have any money. All of the money that the government is giving away, almost at this point, is going on a Chinese credit card or something. It's adding to the debt. We're already over 37 trillion in official debt in the United States, but that discounts the amount of money that they have taken off the books. That is an unfunded liability, but they don't call it debt anymore because they've just changed how they define the national debt. But if you went back and defined the national debt the way it was defined in 1990, our national debt today would be something like $220 trillion. There is no coming back from that. That is a mathematical impossibility. Paying that back, mathematically impossible. Not going to happen. So our country is going to collapse. Its economy, its currency is going to collapse. It's a matter of when, not if. And so any money we give out is too much. That's just, sort of a foredrawn conclusion. But let's talk about Ukraine and the money that they're getting. Now, so again, if my default is that we should not be giving money out anywhere, we shouldn't be taking it from our citizens in the first place, what I'm saying is I think the U.S. government should be much, much smaller. But that means that our government would be much, much weaker on the world stage. Is that something we really want? Perhaps. Perhaps it is. Perhaps it's not. Right now, the United States is still one of the only superpowers on the planet. And we're funding it with debt, but that's the way it goes. If we are one of the superpowers on the planet and we want to stay that way, we have to be engaged in world affairs. We have to be engaged in geopolitics around the world. For us to do that, it's going to take either money or blood, meaning American troops. If we are unwilling, therefore, to spend American blood in the conflict in Ukraine, then money is all we have. It's all we have left. Now, both sides are lying on the amount of money that's being given to the Ukrainians. Both sides, meaning the left and the right, the Democrats and the Republicans. The amount of money that you're hearing bandied about, what I'm seeing is between 150 and $200 billion that's been given to Ukraine. That is not true. The actual figure, as best I can ascertain, is somewhere closer to 66 to 70 billion. And the majority of that is in the form of military hardware, stuff that we were phasing out or that we are, we feel like the Ukrainians need more than we do. Something like $24 billion we have given to Ukraine in cash, in US dollars, and that is going, according to the government minister that I spoke to while I was there this last week, that is going to help fund the Ukrainian government operations, to keep the government running and open, keep people getting paid over there, in order to so that they don't, because they're not collecting much in the way of taxes. The economy has dealt a very severe blow, trillions of dollars lost in that country because of the war. And so that $24 billion is helping, over the course of a year and a half, is helping to actually fund the government in Ukraine. Talking to troops, I'm talking about troops on the front line, talking to chaplains and regular people back behind the front line, people in Kyiv, the mayor of Kyiv, and to the government, the president's advisor, the guy that I talked to there. All of them tell me, as far as they know, there are no big wigs or oligarchs that are getting that money and going off and buying chalets in France or something with the money. There are oversight programs in place that are pretty severe. The Ukrainians say they welcome those oversight, that they will welcome anything that will make the United States feel better about giving them money so that they can keep fighting this war. The second part of that, the 24 billion is in cash. The rest of that is in military hardware. We're talking everything from tanks to trucks to aircraft to ammunition. I have never been a big fan of giving military hardware to other countries because it is durable and fungible, and someday that stuff will be shooting back at us. If we give the money, the stuff that we left in Afghanistan, very likely a lot of those weapons and night vision and things like that are going to start, working their way around the world, and they're going to, eventually end up shooting back at us. If they end up shooting back at us, I'm going to try to read these. Yeah, right. Okay, well, thanks for your messages. Go ahead and keep sending them. I don't I don't know if I'll get to all the questions, but I'd be happy to answer them. Anyway, the military hardware that we left in Afghanistan, that we left in Vietnam, for Pete's sake, eventually is shooting back at us, and that is a big problem. In this case, we're not giving a lot of small arms to Ukraine. We're giving a lot of very big arms like HIMARS and howitzers. Those things are much less fungible, much less likely to get sold out the back door, and much less likely to be used by a cartel or something to shoot back at us. Now, Stinger missiles, javelins, man-pads, those man-portable anti-tank devices, those things are a real concern. And we don't want those to end up shooting back at us and our guys at some point. However, the Ukrainians are making very good use of those things, and everything I've seen a lot of them over there, and I've seen a lot that have been used. Talking to the guys on the front lines, they say we can't get enough of those things. They come in very, very handy, and we are shooting them as fast as we get them from the United States. So I think that the chances of those going out the back door, very many of them at least, is pretty low. There have been two cases that I know about where the Ukrainian the military has found or caught army members, military members, engaged in some kind of scams where they're selling. In this case, they weren't American weapons; they were just AKs and stuff like that, AK-47s. They were selling them. They did catch them. They did prosecute them. They did arrest them. They did put a stop to it. So not to say that none of that is taking place, but I can say it's not happening on a wholesale basis. Now, should we be spending money in Ukraine? Should we be helping Ukraine, period? Well, I think that it's easy to say from a moral standpoint, Ukraine didn't attack anybody. I've seen propagandists online saying that Ukraine attacked Russia in 2014. No, they didn't. Ukraine did not attack Russia. Russia sent troops into the Donbas region and took places like Crimea and parts of Luhansk and Donetsk provinces. And Ukraine went to war against those guys. They were, the Russians formed separatist armies made up of guys that lived in those areas and said that all of the troops were, it was a separatist movement and not Russian troops, but that's been thoroughly debunked. There were Russian troops in those areas, taking those areas and controlling those areas. Ukraine never attacked into Russia. They never bombed into Russia. They couldn't. Russians controlled more than 100 kilometers inside Ukraine, and Ukrainian artillery can't reach that far to get into Russia. So they are now. I mean, the Ukrainians are sending drones and drone boats into Russian waters and Russian airspace and are attacking Moscow on an almost daily basis. And that's a great thing because it helps the Russian people feel the cost of this war, where they have been largely sheltered from it to this point because they're not told about it by Russian propaganda. And that's the only news that they have access to in Russia. So the Ukrainians did not start this war. Therefore, from a moral standpoint, we should stand with Ukraine and we should stand against Russian aggression. Russia wants to change the world order. They want to change the whole game. They want to change the rules of the game. And these are rules that the United States set and has enforced for decades, almost 70 years. And so that is a big problem. And you have to ask yourself, do you want Russia setting the rules of the game? If you think that Russia would do a better job than the United States at policing the world, at standing for freedom, I got a bridge across the Kerch Strait between Crimea and the Russian mainland that I could sell you. The Russians are not going to be better people. They're not going to be more. Their flag will not fly over the world in blessing. Let's put it that way. And I'm not saying everything the United States has done has been correct. Almost everything that we've done in the end ends up being unprofitable for the world, and that's mostly because we start out with the best of intentions, and then we get tired of it too soon, and we pull out. Look what happened in Afghanistan. That is the biggest fear in Ukraine right now, that the United States is going to pull in Afghanistan in Ukraine. We're going to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. I would say at this point, despite my misgivings about giving money away at all for any reason, I would say at this point, we're in for a penny, in for a pound. We have already given, it's about between 60 and $70 billion to Ukraine over the last year and a half. And we have enabled them to stop the Russian advance. We've enabled them to absolutely wreck the Russian military. By third-party objective standards, the Russian military has been degraded by about 50% of their combat power since the start of this war. If that's the case, if Russia has been degraded by 50% of their combat power since the start of this war, then the United States got a bargain for $60 billion. That's a bargain. You keep in mind, the United States is spending, the military budget for this year is somewhere near $1 trillion, $990 billion, something like that. And so if we spent 10% of that even, degrading one of our two largest adversaries by 50% and making sure that they will never be a threat militarily to the West, to NATO, to Europe, in the foreseeable future for generations to come at this point, then yeah, that's a bargain. And I can guarantee you that the generals at the Pentagon would have written that check all day long if you had told them that for a mere $60 billion, they could degrade the Russian military by 50%. They would have also written that check all day long if you had told them that they would get in the balance a laboratory, a combat laboratory, in which they could test all of the Russian hardware, all the Russian military equipment against American equipment and learn their capabilities. We have learned so much. Our military has just gotten a treasure trove of information out of this conflict, not just about Russian strategies and tactics, but about their equipment, their combat power, their readiness, about their command structure, about all these things that will be very profitable, and I believe in the long run will end up saving the United States military far more than $60 billion, because we will have a much better idea of what we need to spend money on and how we need to spend it, and we can more tightly focus our spending on China rather than trying to focus it on China and Russia for now. Here's a comment that says, about the new order, I do think America should stay. Whoever becomes the next superpower, China, Russia, India, whatever, they're not trying to fix the West's mistakes, but implement their own ways. Well, yeah, exactly. And if you think that, living in a world where Russia is preeminent would be a good thing, you are mistaken. That would not be a good thing. I've been to the places where Russia is in control, everywhere from Armenia to Syria. And let me tell you, Russia is brutal. They give no care whatsoever for human life. It's all about maintaining the state. You are just a cog in the machine, and they could care less about whether you live or die and whether or not you're comfortable. Russia is a lowest common denominator culture, meaning everybody should be reduced to the lowest common denominator, except for those people who are more equal than others, as some people say, more equal than others in the oligarchs, the people who have survived or thrived due to graft and corruption. Those people make gazillions, and the rest of the people, there are literally tens of millions of people in Russia who don't have indoor plumbing. Tens of millions of people. who have never sat on a toilet inside a building. I'm not joking about that. That is the truth. We're finding that from a lot of the Russian soldiers that get captured by the Ukrainians, is that we learn about their lives and the way that they live. And the Russians, the first thing that they do when they get to Ukraine is they start stealing stuff because, and one of the biggest items that they steal are toilets because they're just amazed that you have something where you can actually defecate indoors. You don't have to go outside in the wintertime and crap in a hole in the ground. Many of them don't even know how they work. I saw one interview where a Russian soldier was saying, "I don't want one of those toilets. Those things are disgusting. I can't imagine crapping in that thing and then having to scoop it out and take it outside and put it in a hole." Not knowing, not understanding how toilets work and that they actually flush. He just thought they were a receptacle for your bodily wastes that you then had to clean out somehow. That's ridiculous. It's unbelievable. But this is the kind of thing that they're finding. And so Russia is a much less developed place than we really understood, at least myself. I've been to Russia several times, but only to Moscow. But once you get outside of Moscow, apparently it's like subsistence farmers and people with no electricity or running water. It's a very, very primitive place. Ukraine, by contrast, has places that are very primitive, but not nearly to the extent that Russia does. And they are much closer to European in their cultural values and their development than they are to Russia anymore. And that's one of the reasons that this rift has been forming between Russia and Ukraine for many, many years. And it just came to a head in 2022. Actually 2014, and really came to a head in 2022. So should we be there? Well, we are there, and so it's sort of a ridiculous question at this point to ask, should we be there? The real question is, should we pull out now and allow all of the money that we've spent in Ukraine to be for naught and let the Ukrainians down and send the message to all of our allies and adversaries once again that the United States cannot be trusted in the long run, that the United States will never live up to its promises. And that, I think, is the reason why, the biggest reason why we should stay and we should see this thing through. I think that if we do, that the United States could lead the world into so crippling Russia that they will not be a threat to anybody for generations to come. That is a very good thing. It may even lead to a change in the government, in the culture in Russia, to the point that they become more like Ukraine, and which would be a very good thing. So that is what I wanted to say. It frustrates me to hear people. I understand the argument that we shouldn't be giving money to Ukraine, but it frustrates me to see how much we have given to Ukraine already, the vast majority of it in the form of military hardware that is not going to line the pockets of oligarchs. And to see us having made those sacrifices to that extent already, and then so many people saying we just need to pull out and do nothing for those people and let them be subsumed by Russia, change the world order into a much worse place. And, there you go. Send the message to our allies and adversaries that the Americans cannot be counted on. We have not spent one drop of American blood in Ukraine to this point, and I'd like to see it stay that way. So if it costs us a little bit of money, this is one of those things. It's like when you're broke and your washing machine or your refrigerator goes out, you've got to have a refrigerator in your house. And so maybe you just have to put it on a credit card and hope to make it up later. That is where I think we're at with Ukraine. If you disagree or if you have thoughts on this, I'd love to hear them. I will take questions real quick. If anybody has a question from my recent trip, you also stay tuned because I'm going to be posting a lot of content that I wasn't able to. We need our own regime change. Amen, brother. Yes, we do. I'm going to be posting a lot of the video that I shot, not just in Ukraine, but I also spent a week reporting on the immigration crisis in Europe. I went to Calais, I went to Paris, We also did the Netherlands and talked about how the left is basically trying to destroy farming in the Netherlands in the name of stopping climate change, which is a fool's errand and will only lead to less human flourishing and lots of death and destruction around the globe. And we also got a chance to go to Mont Saint Michel, which is a fantastic. If you've not been to Mont Saint Michel, you ought to go. I mean, I'm just going to put together something about it just to show you. Listen, the reason that I do this podcast, the reason that we've got, I don't know, coming up on 2,000 videos already, is that this is a place where I can go long form and go very short form and can tell you more about what I'm doing and what I'm seeing. I've had so many people who've wanted to go with me and say, "Oh, I wish I could carry your bag sometime when you go where you go." Well, this is how you do that. You watch the podcast and you can get the behind the scenes look at what it's like traveling to 25 hot zones a year. And so thanks for coming along with us. I am going to be running a trip to Cartagena to explore the human trafficking angle in September. If you're interested in going, leave a comment and I will contact you. And I'm gonna open it up and I'm gonna take some of my viewers with me because I would like for you to be able to see the extent of the human trafficking and sex trafficking problem for yourself. Cartagena is a hotbed of sex trafficking, lots of child sex trafficking. I am supporting a woman, a single mother there, who has been literally fighting every night to try to keep her 12-year-old daughter and 9-year-old son from being accosted by American pedophiles who are prowling around the streets of Cartagena looking to pick up little kids. And she's like, I just can't do this anymore. I got to do something different. So we're going to see if we can help her and help a few people while we're down there. If you'd like to join us, I don't have the exact dates yet because I'm waiting on another trip to settle out first, but it'll be sometime in September. And if you want to get on the list to at least get more information about it, let me know. Please go to chuckholton.locals.com and subscribe for not just my podcasts here, but I also put the actual products that I create from these trips that I take. I put them up for you to be able to see them on the Locals channel there. And any articles I write, any other interviews I do, anything like that, all goes on there so you can follow what I'm doing. And thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. The channel's been growing a lot recently, and I'm very gratified by that. So I really appreciate all of you. Please subscribe and like here if you haven't. Only about 30% of the people who watch my content are subscribers, so it'd be nice if more of you would hit that subscribe button. And that's just a cheap way that you can support me because that leads to sponsorships and all sorts of other things too. So thanks a lot. Love you guys. We'll see you later.